I never expected a mortgage statement to feel like a declaration of war. Yet here I was, seated at my small kitchen table under the flickering light of a single bulb, the crisp envelope in my hands like a gauntlet thrown. My name, Avery Hawthorne, was scrawled across the front in bold, official letters, enough to make my stomach twist into knots. It had started, as most of the crushing moments in my life did, with a whisper. "She's useless," I'd heard my boss murmur one morning, his voice low enough that he thought I'd never catch it. I had. I'd always caught everything, but telling my employer that I'd noticed his comment would have been pointless. I was disposable in his eyes. I had a choice then, to sink further into the shadows of his disdain, or to step into the light, unsteady but determined. I chose the latter. I orchestrated a plan so quiet and precise that no alarms of threat ever rang out. He called me useless. I took that as a dare. That morning, I arrived at the office before the sun even considered rising. I flicked the lights on in my department and clicked my keyboard into life. No one questioned my presence. After all, I was the assistant project manager, the one they always overlooked, the one they leaned on at the last minute. I was invisible, which often meant I could move without notice. While others were still stumbling in with lattes and rushed apologies for being late, I was already compiling spreadsheets that charted every decimal of profit and loss on our latest real estate venture. I dug through files that no one else cared to read, and I found it. A miscalculation, a tiny oversight in the loan package for the Hudson Heights condominium project. If corrected, the bank would demand the developers cover an additional six-figure shortfall on closing costs. I could have kept it to myself, used it as leverage to secure a promotion, or at least a courtesy raise. But I wanted something more meaningful. I wanted validation, vindication, and the satisfaction of seeing the arrogant smirks wiped off the faces of those who'd mocked me. So I emailed the bank directly, copied my boss, the developers, and the head of finance. I tipped them off. The fallout was immediate. Conference calls erupted, furious voices crackling over speakerphones. Developers recoiled at the news, scrambling resources and renegotiating terms. My boss's face turned the color of regret when he realized who had triggered the avalanche. He glared at me across the table in our glass-walled conference room, eyes blazing with fury. But I stayed calm. I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. "I believe we owe some thanks," the bank officer had written back, "to Avery Hawthorne, whose attention to detail saved us millions in unaccounted liabilities." I printed that email and taped it to my cubicle wall, a trophy no one could dismiss. Word spread. Suddenly, the colleagues who once ignored my presence sought my advice on projects. Conference room doors that had been shut in my face swung open. I walked past them, head held high, but I felt a hollow pang. I hadn't done it for praise. I'd done it to prove that usefulness wasn't defined by titles or public applause. It was forged in action, in integrity. And yet, despite the shift in respect, I felt a restlessness in my bones. I was still tethered to a company that saw me as expendable, a cog that could be replaced at any moment. The victory felt too small. I needed something grander. Something that would rewrite the very definition of who Avery Hawthorne was. I found my answer in the quiet hum of my laptop that night. While scanning through local foreclosure listings, a hobby I'd long kept tucked away, I noticed a familiar name. The developers from Hudson Heights. They had defaulted on a secondary lien, and the property was headed to auction. I leaned closer, heart pounding as I realized the implications. If I could rally a small group of private investors, secure the funds, and outbid every corporate giant at the auction, I could claim that property. Not for greed, but for the principle of empowerment. I wanted to show them I wasn't nothing, a powerless pawn, a useless assistant. I would claim their fortress of glass and steel, and inscribe my name not just on a spreadsheet, but on the very walls they once controlled. That realization brought me here, the kitchen table strewn with financial statements, bank loan offers, and projection charts. My cat, Nimbus, brushed against my leg, purring as if he understood the gravity of my plan. I smiled down at him, whispering, "Careful, Nimbus. We're about to rewrite a lot more than property records. I'd spent the past month covertly assembling a team of risk-takers, a retired banker hungry for one last thrill, a tech entrepreneur eager to diversify, and a real estate lawyer with a taste for high-stakes gambles. Each of them had doubted me, first for my audacity, then for my sanity. But after I laid out my vision, saw the spark ignite in their eyes, even they began to believe. In 2 days, we would stand at the courthouse steps, paddles raised, ready to bid. The developers would smirk, certain of their deep pockets and well-connected networks. They'd see my name on the registration list and laugh. They'd whisper, "This girl thinks she can outbid us." But they wouldn't know Avery Hawthorne. They wouldn't know how hunger for respect could fuel every fiber of my being. Tomorrow, when that auctioneer's gavel falls, it won't just signify a property changed hands. It will echo across boardrooms and cubicles, reminding everyone that usefulness isn't granted, it's claimed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The courthouse steps felt like the summit of a mountain I had spent my life climbing. My palms were slick, heart racing, as I adjusted the lapel of my blazer. Nimbus, my steadfast companion, would have given me an approving headbutt if he could, but this was a journey I had to make without him. Around me, the private investors I had recruited stood quietly, their eyes flicking to the grand neoclassical facade of the building. It seemed to loom over us, its pillars like sentinels guarding secrets of money and power. We moved inside, and the air was cool, tinged with an antiseptic clarity. Rows of chairs filled quickly with other bidders. Well-dressed real estate tycoons, a few corporate sharks, even a handful of hedge fund managers. Their presence was like a tide, threatening to drown us in capital. I couldn't help but notice the developers from Hudson Heights, Jonathan and Pierce Vance, twins who had built their empire on other people's blind trust. They exchanged smug glances, evidently pleased at the pseudonymous Hawthorne Holdings LLC that I had used to register. They had no idea the woman behind the name was the useless assistant they'd sneered at just weeks ago. A clerk's voice echoed through the hall. "All right, everyone. We'll begin shortly. Please make your way to the registration desk if you haven't already paid your deposit." My pulse thundered, but each breath I drew steadied me. I led my team to the registration desk. Marjorie Clark, the retired banker with a glint in her eye, Rafael Santos, the tech entrepreneur in his signature leather jacket, and Layla Ahmed, the real estate attorney whose financial acumen was matched only by her fierce loyalty. They had each given up other ventures to stand beside me, believing in a vision they'd barely dared to dream. We slid our deposit checks across the counter, and the clerk nodded, stamping our paddles with the number 18. A small victory, but one that tipped the scale in my mind toward inevitability. Paddle 18. There was a poetic symmetry to it. 8 and 1, two numbers that, when reversed, spelled hope. Finding our seats, I unfolded the auction brochure. It was a glossy booklet, each page a testament to the financial muscle of the Vance twins. Hudson Heights Condos, Unit B12, Floor Plan C, it read. The description boasted floor-to-ceiling windows, rooftop access, and panoramic views of the river, luxuries that had once belonged to the developer's portfolio only. My hands trembled as I realized the fate of those assets now rested not in corporate boardrooms, but in the grip of a woman they had underestimated. The auctioneer stepped onto the podium, gavel in hand. He was a tall man, gray at the temples, with a voice smooth as a polished marble surface. He cleared his throat and surveyed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We'll start with Lot 101, Hudson Heights Condominium, Unit B12. Opening bid at $2.2 million. A hush fell. Bids began, tentative at first, $2.30, then $2.40. Soon the usual players were at $2.60 without hesitation. I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. At $2.70, I lifted my paddle. The room's energy shifted, as if someone had thrown a stone into still water. Murmurs rippled through the seats. My heart pounded against my ribs, but I kept my gaze fixed on the auctioneer. $2.7 million, paddle 18, he announced. The twins' fine smiles faltered. They exchanged quick glances. Raphael nudged me under the table. Let them think you're bluffing, he whispered, though I doubt they needed much encouragement. The developer's representative, a suited man with slicked back hair, raised his paddle. $2.75 million. The bid was renewed. I leaned forward. I had told my team that if things escalated beyond our highest comfortable limit, we would withdraw. No casualties, no regrets. But I also knew the message I wanted to send. $2. $8 million, I called, voice steady despite every nerve screaming otherwise. The room seemed to exhale as the auctioneer looked from my raised paddle to the twins. $2.8 million, paddle 18, any advance? A pregnant silence. Then the twins' representative faltered. $2.80 5? He offered, uncertain. I hesitated, the quiet moment stretching into an eternity. My mind raced through our capital reserves, our exit strategy, the risks we had willingly embraced. Then I nodded. $2.85 million. The gavel hovered, ready to fall. $2.85 million, paddle 18. Sold, pending final confirmation. The auctioneer's gavel struck wood with a resonant crack that echoed in my chest like a drumbeat of victory. The crowd erupted into applause and surprised gasps. I allowed myself the smallest of smiles, though my stomach twisted at the thought of what came next. Because winning the bid was half the battle. Now, I had to secure the financing, and fast. The twins would use every legal maneuver, every clandestine social connection, to challenge our claim. They would accuse Hawthorne Holdings of impropriety, of shrewd tactics that bent the rules. They didn't know me, but they would soon learn. When my back was against the wall, I didn't break. I unleashed everything I had. As the room cleared, I gathered my team. Marjorie clapped both hands on my shoulders. You did it, Avery, she said, her voice trembling. I nodded, but my mind had already leapt ahead, drafting emails, calling lenders, preparing counterarguments. There was no time to revel in triumph. The real work was just beginning. I stepped outside into the afternoon light, breath catching at the bright sky, the city humming around me. This was the moment that would define everything. A so-called useless assistant, standing at the crossroads of ambition and vindication. I steadied myself, remembering every slight I had endured, every sneer and dismissive glance. The Vance twins were about to see my name etched on something far more tangible than a mortgage statement, on the walls of Hudson Heights, on the ledgers of their empire, and in the tale they would tell for years to come. And as I climbed into my car, racing against the clock to finalize our financing, I felt a single truth burn through me. They called me useless. But they had no idea what I was capable of. The next battle would commence at the bank. When we collide with their legal team, they'll realize that I never intended to play by their rules, and that, in the end, I would emerge not just useful, but unstoppable. When I pulled into the drive of First National Bank, the sky had turned the color of slate, as if the universe itself sensed the storm I was about to unleash. My phone buzzed incessantly, lenders checking on updated appraisals, Layla pinging with revisions to our covenant clauses, Marjorie leaving a hurried voicemail about a funding gap she'd uncovered last minute. Every notification was a reminder that this victory could slip through our fingers if a single letter of our agreement was miswritten. I stepped into the lobby, the automatic doors whispering shut behind me. The marble floors gleamed under chandeliers, and polished tellers smiled with professional detachment. Their calm belied the tension of the day. At least, it did until I approached the private banking desk. Ms. Hawthorne, the loan officer greeted, her tone a practiced balance of warmth and reservation. She gestured to a plush leather chair. Please, have a seat. I sank into the chair, smoothing the front of my blazer. Across from me, her desk was a fortress of paperwork. Loan agreements, title searches, due diligence reports. I slid our signed letter of intent across the table. I trust everything is in order? I asked, voice measured. She flipped through pages, nodding as her eyes scanned each signature. But the slightest furrow of her brow told me they'd hit a snag. I swallowed. We're on a tight timeline, I added softly. Can this be expedited? Certainly, she said, clearing her throat. However, there's an issue. The appraisal came back lower than expected. They value the property at $2.6 million. My heart stuttered. 2.6? That would blow a massive hole in our financing. My mind raced. I had assumed a conservative estimate of $2.75 million, but now our entire capital stack was in jeopardy. I forced a calm smile. That's unusual, I replied. The comparable sales listed. She held up a hand. I've spoken to multiple appraisers. They're consistent. My chest tightened. I had planned for challenges, but this was a gut punch. If we couldn't secure the extra $250,000, the deal would collapse, and the Vance twins would swoop back in, maybe even challenge our title, claiming impropriety in our bidding process. Panic threatened to rise in my throat, but I steadied myself. There must be an alternative, I said. Can we get a second appraisal? Or perhaps a bridge loan? She hesitated, then nodded. We can commission another appraisal, but it will take at least 5 business days. 5 days. Avalanche of corporate lawyers. Injunction filings. Publicity stunts. I needed a solution now. I looked at my phone. Marjorie's message. We can float the gap from personal capital, but we need your approval. I set the phone on the desk. I'll cover the gap, I said firmly. Take the funds from my personal line of credit. Then we'll refinance once the second appraisal comes in. She hesitated, but then began typing. The decision was mine, and I made it without a second thought. If they called me useless for lack of resources, they would eat their words when I bared every asset I had. As the paperwork printed, my phone rang. Layla's name flashed. I answered on speaker, keeping the loan officer in view. Avery, we have a problem, Layla's voice crackled through the speaker. The Vance twins just filed a notice of dispute. They claim you used inside information from our company. I froze. Inside information? Our only corporate link was that I was an employee. Hardly proprietary secrets. Layla continued. They're seeking an injunction to halt the auction transfer. We need to respond immediately, or they'll tie this up in court for months. My vision blurred. Had they anticipated my move so quickly? Or had someone leaked our strategy to them? I pressed my palm to the desk, fighting to contain the adrenaline that prickled my skin. Get me everything on their filing, I commanded. And Lila, line up emergency counsel. We're not going down without a fight. I ended the call and turned to the loan officer, masking the fury in my eyes. How soon can I sign? I asked. She slid the pen across the desk. Whenever you're ready. I signed. Each stroke brought us closer to either triumph or ruin. When I finished, I leaned back and exhaled. A single breath that carried the weight of every doubt I had ever harbored. Outside, the wind howled through the bank's entrance. I stood, gathering the thick stack of papers. As I did, another name appeared on my phone, Jonathan Vance, calling directly. I steadied my hand, refusing to show hesitation. I pressed answer. Ms. Hawthorne, he began, voice silky and cold. I believe there's been a misunderstanding. I suggest we resolve this quietly. I cut him off. There's nothing you can say that will stop us. His laugh was low. We'll see about that. I hung up, ignoring the way my chest heaved. The loan was secured, but the legal war had begun. Behind me, the bank's marble walls suddenly felt claustrophobic, as if conspiring to trap me in this moment of reckoning. I stepped out into the night, phone still in hand, mind already racing through counter-arguments, PR statements, and emergency meetings. I had gambled everything I had, and now the Vance twins wanted to play dirty. But they didn't know Avery Hawthorne. I didn't just survive challenges, I turned them into triumphs. And as I crossed the bank's threshold, raising my chin to the dark sky, I whispered to myself, they called me useless. And tonight, they'd learn how unstoppable I could be when cornered. The skyline of downtown blurred past my car window as I sped to our makeshift headquarters, Marjorie's townhouse on Pine Avenue. The engine's hum was a steady metronome to my racing thoughts. Legal briefs, damage control strategies, investor concerns, All clamored for attention. I needed clarity. I burst through the door to find Layla pacing beside a whiteboard scrawled with timelines and bullet points. Raphael was on a video call, his face lit by the glow of his laptop. Nimbus's faint meow drifted from the bedroom, but there was no time to indulge his curiosity. Layla met my eyes, her expression grave. They've filed for an emergency injunction. We've got less than 24 hours to respond or risk the transfer being frozen. I nodded, shedding my blazer. Draft our counterpetition, emphasize the legitimacy of the auction process, highlight the public notices. Everything was by the book. She clicked her tongue. I'm on it, but they've also accused us of insider trading, claiming you accessed non-public financials. My jaw tightened. Find me the source of that allegation. It's baseless. Marjorie appeared, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She handed me one. I pulled your line of credit statement. You dropped over $200,000 tonight. You sure about that bridge loan? I sipped the coffee, the bitter heat steadying me. It was necessary. We couldn't afford delay. Raphael ended his call, rubbing his temples. The press is sniffing around. There's a rumor mill spinning that you orchestrated a corporate heist. Quote. I set my cup down and circled to the whiteboard. We turned the narrative. We didn't execute a heist, we executed due diligence. We saved a property that would otherwise sit in limbo. We're the saviors here. Layla jumped in. I'll prep a press release. Highlight your prior achievements. Bank's email acknowledgement, your performance record. Make you the underdog hero. I underlined a timeline on the board. Then we hit social media. Share excerpts from the bank statement praising my diligence. Offer interviews. Make it clear we played by the rules. Marjorie tapped her phone. I've lined up an interview with the Financial Chronicle tomorrow morning. I took a deep breath. Good. Now, we need to disrupt their impact. Find any skeletons in the Vance twins' closets. Legal runs on outdated permits. Corporate fines. Anything that paints them as the villains. Raphael cracked his knuckles. I'm on it. I'll mine the public records and talk to a few contacts at City Hall. Over the next few hours, we became a blur of action. Layla drafting legal motions, Marjorie recalibrating financial buffers, Raphael digging through filings, and me coordinating, calling contacts at the bank, confirming appraisal reevaluations. Nimbus leapt onto the whiteboard ledge, batting at a stray marker. I smiled at his antics, my silent reminder that life moved forward, even in crisis. Night turned to early morning as we finalized our strategy. The injunction response was concise and emphatic. The press kit was polished. The skeleton search yielded a discrepancy. One of the twins had failed to disclose a minor zoning violation that could delay future sales by months. I stared at the revelation. This is gold, I murmured. Layla nodded. We'll file an FOIA request today, leak it tomorrow. Exhaustion washed over me, but there was no time to rest. The clock was ticking. As dawn approached, I typed a final email to our investors. We're locked and loaded. Expect full deployment of our legal and PR strategy within 48 hours. Hold tight. I hit send and collapsed onto the couch, the adrenaline ebbing to bone-deep weariness. My eyes drifted to the whiteboard, a battlefield map of bullet points and deadlines. I closed my eyes, if only for a moment. Then my phone buzzed, an alert from the courthouse. Our injunction response had been accepted, but the hearing was scheduled in 12 hours. I sprang upright. Everyone up, I called. We gathered around the table, bloodshot but resolute. I raised my coffee mug in a makeshift toast. Tomorrow, we take the field. They'll see that calling me useless was their first mistake. The others echoed, voices muffled by exhaustion. To victory. As sunlight crept through the blinds, I realized this war was far from over. And if I thought conquering a $2.85 million auction was bold, tomorrow's showdown would test every ounce of my resolve. Because in the end, worth isn't given. It's proven. The courtroom was a crucible, every sound amplified. The rustle of papers, the hiss of whispered legal counsel, the tap of the judge's gavel as it summoned attention. As I took my seat at the plaintiff's table, my palms were slick with sweat. Nimbus's gentle presence had been replaced by the silent solidarity of Marjorie, Layla, and Raphael. All of us knew what was at stake. Not just a building, but the vindication of a woman whose so-called usefulness had been questioned at every turn. The door opened, and in strutted Jonathan and Pierce Vance, flanked by a phalanx of high-priced attorneys. Their tailored suits were crisp, their smiles thin, a silent challenge in their eyes. Jonathan caught my gaze briefly, and I saw the flicker of doubt. He was banking on intimidation. I was banking on every ounce of preparation I had poured into this fight. We rose as the judge entered. An imposing woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. "Be seated," she commanded. Papers shuffled, chairs creaked, and a hush settled. The Vance attorney stood first. His opening argument was slick: allegations of insider trading, impropriety in the auction, and questioning my credibility as the rightful bidder. He painted me as an opportunist, someone who'd exploited corporate knowledge for personal gain. When it was my turn, I stood and felt the room's breath hitch. I took a deep breath. "Your Honor," I began, voice steady, "I'd like to address the core of this dispute, the integrity of the auction process." I laid out our timeline: public notices, registered bids, sealed deposits, the printed auction rules, all posted in municipal records. I referenced Layla's motions and our counters, and I presented the second appraisal as proof that the property's value outweighed the Vance's claims. But more importantly, I challenged their narrative of impropriety. "They call me useless," I continued, locking eyes with the twins, "yet it's my diligence that uncovered the shortfall and prevented this project from collapsing under unseen liabilities. It's my meticulous attention to detail that identified an undervaluation, and my willingness to risk personal capital that secured this property when a corporation would have walked away." A murmur rippled through the gallery. The judge leaned forward, pen poised above her notepad. I pressed on, detailing the zoning violations I'd discovered in their filings, broken permits that could delay sales, a fact they'd sought to bury. Midway through my presentation, my phone buzzed quietly in my pocket. I reached for it, heart pounding, but paused. No, I had to remain composed. Still, I stole a glance. An email from Layla marked urgent. The Vance twins were circulating a press leak about my past financial struggles, attempts to paint me as desperate. It was time. I raised my voice. "With your permission, Your Honor, I'd like to introduce this," I said, handing her a printed article from the Financial Chronicle, praising my previous work. Saved millions in liabilities, lauded by banking officials, championed for ethical vigilance. The room erupted in a chorus of surprised whispers. I spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "This story took us a long time. If you like it, subscribe. Now, back to the story." Silence fell, and then a ripple of stifled laughter passed through some corners. The stand was mine again. And I drove home the fact that my record spoke louder than any smear campaign. When I sat back down, I saw Jonathan's shoulders slump fractionally. The Vance attorneys exchanged worried glances. The judge cleared her throat. "We'll take a brief recess before hearing closing statements." Recess was an eternity of tension. My team huddled around me, their faces awash with relief and exhaustion. "That was brilliant," Marjorie whispered, squeezing my hand. "You turned their smear on its head." I nodded, though my mind was already racing toward the final arguments. There was no room for complacency. When we reconvened, Layla delivered our closing statement with surgical precision, reiterating the law, championing transparency, and underscoring how the Vance twins' own negligence endangered the entire project. The judge nodded at each point, pen flowing across the paper. Jonathan rose for his final words. His voice was tight, controlled, but I saw the uncertainty behind it. He tried one last appeal to credibility, but the momentum had shifted irreversibly. Finally, the judge leaned back in her chair. "In view of the evidence presented, I find the plaintiff's claims valid and the defendant's objections meritless. The auction results shall stand. Ms. Hawthorne holds title to Hudson Heights Unit B12. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. I closed my eyes, relief flooding every fiber of my being. This was it. When I looked back up, the judge had already adjourned the session. Papers rustled as we gathered our things, and I felt Lila brush a tear from her cheek. Raphael exhaled deeply, a triumphant grin spreading across his face. Stepping outside into the warm afternoon sun, the weight of weeks-long conflict lifted from my shoulders. I inhaled deeply, the hum of the city filling my senses. I knew there were still logistics to finalize, refinancing, permits, repairs, but the battle had been won. I lifted my phone, typing a quick message to our investors. We did it. Then, amidst the cheers and embraces, I allowed myself to smile, a genuine, unguarded smile that spoke of every challenge overcome. Because they called me useless. And today, my name was on their mortgage. The cheers outside the courthouse had barely faded when I realized the next battle loomed on the horizon. Title in hand, investors congratulating me, and press crews clamoring for sound bites, yet the stakes were far from settled. The Vance twins wouldn't retreat gracefully. Their empire had been dented, and now they'd either rebuild or retaliate. Raphael insisted on a victory celebration, champagne and hors d'oeuvre, at a rooftop bar overlooking the city skyline. But I declined, offering my thanks and stepping away. My mind was already whirring toward the property's first steps, securing permits, organizing renovations, and planning the grand reopening. Hudson Heights was more than a purchase, it was a statement. I headed straight to the building site, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the concrete skeleton of Unit B12. The developers had left the premises in limbo, unfinished walls, exposed wiring, and windows boarded up to keep squatters at bay. It was a stark contrast to the polished brochures and sleek renderings I'd seen, but this was where true value could be created. I strode past the makeshift security guard and unlocked the front door with the key provided by the court-appointed receiver. The echo of my footsteps reverberated through the empty halls as I made my way to what would soon be a living room with panoramic views of the river, a blank canvas awaiting transformation. My phone buzzed, a message from Layla. Schedule for rezoning hearing is set for next week. We need your testimony. I typed back, I'll be there. Also, follow up with the city engineers about the zoning violation. She replied instantly, on it. The first task was getting the construction team mobilized. I dialed the number of a project manager I'd sourced during the auction. Jacob Chen answered on the second ring, his voice bright. I heard the news. Congratulations. I've got a crew ready to start demo and repair as soon as you give the word. Meet me here tomorrow morning, I said. We'll go over timeline and budget. There's no room for delays. He chuckled. I like your style. I hung up and stood amid the rubble. The potential was palpable. Fresh paint, new floors, modern fixtures. I could almost hear the click of heels as potential buyers toured the unit. But first, we had to clear the past. Clipping on my phone, I messaged Nadia, a social media coordinator I'd hired in anticipation of the project. Visual update. Today's shot needs to highlight the contrast, from boarding to open vistas. Let's leverage the victory momentum. She replied with fire emojis. On it. As the sun dipped lower, I walked to the balcony aperture, the wind tugging at my hair. I placed my hand on the rough brick, feeling the cool solidness beneath my palm. This was more than an asset. It was a legacy. Every step I took to revive the property would resonate as proof of my worth. I called Marjorie, who was already reviewing refinancing options. Rates are favorable, but we need to lock in by month end, she said. I'll sign the documents tonight, I assured her, and let's explore adding sustainable upgrades. It'll boost resale and align with modern values. She paused. Great idea. I looked out at the river glistening in the failing light, thinking of how far I'd come, the useless assistant, underestimated at every turn, now commanding a multi-million-dollar redevelopment. I felt a surge of pride, but also a sobering responsibility. Nimbus's meow in my pocket pulled me back to earth. Checking my phone, I saw a text from him. Okay, from Lila. Media wants before and after visuals for tomorrow's press briefing. I exhaled. Send them today's footage. Emphasize the transformation narrative. I snapped a few photos. Boarded windows, debris-strewn floors, then one of me silhouetted against the open balcony. I attached the images to an email and hit send, envisioning how this story would capture the public's imagination. As I drove home under the glow of streetlights, my thoughts turned to tomorrow's rezoning hearing. I had to be persuasive but concise, demonstrate community benefit, and counter any last-minute objections from the developers. There would be opposition, local homeowners wary of increased property values and rental rates. I needed allies. Reaching for my contacts, I called Councilmember Idris Malik, who had expressed interest in sustainable urban development. He picked up after 3 rings. "Ms. Hawthorne," he greeted warmly, "congratulations on your victory. I've been following your story." "Thank you, Councilmember. I'm preparing for the rezoning hearing and would appreciate your support, especially on the green retrofit plan." He paused, then said, "Count on it. I'll join you at the hearing. This is exactly the kind of project our district needs." Relief washed through me. I can't tell you how much that means. We hung up, and I drove the rest of the way in a thoughtful silence. The next 24 hours would be critical. Courtrooms, construction sites, boardrooms. But I felt ready. Every doubt had been challenged, every obstacle dismantled. I parked outside my apartment building and sat for a moment, the engine off. The city hummed around me like a living organism. I closed my eyes and whispered a quiet mantra. I am capable. I am worthy. I will not fail. Tomorrow I would stand before the council, articulate vision and resolve, and secure the final permit needed to breathe life back into Hudson Heights. And in doing so, I would remind everyone once and for all that utility is not measured by perception, but by impact. The council chambers were abuzz with anticipation as I stepped up to the podium. Councilmember Malik nodded at me from the front row, his presence a quiet reassurance. The dais above loomed like a judge's bench, but this arena was different. Here, community voices, developers, and public officials all had a say. My pulse pounded, yet beneath that, a core of calm I'd cultivated through every trial. I had arrived early, reviewing my bullet points on a tablet: sustainability upgrades, economic revitalization, community engagement. I glanced over at the dozen people in support: local business owners eager for foot traffic, environmental advocates, construction workers who'd find jobs under my contract. Their hope was tangible, and I felt the weight of their expectations. The hearing began with procedural formalities. Then came the opposition. A few homeowners from the neighboring block, worried about rising property taxes and disruption. One elderly man, cane in hand, spoke of cherished views and quiet streets. I listened, nodding respectfully, acknowledging their concerns. It wasn't lip service. I understood that progress often came at a personal cost. When my turn arrived, I stood and adjusted the microphone. Good morning, Council Chair Robinson and members of the Council. My name is Avery Hawthorne, Principal of Hawthorne Holdings. I'm here to request approval for the zoning amendment necessary to proceed with the sustainable restoration of Hudson Heights Unit B12. I paused, meeting the eyes of those before me. This project transforms an orphaned property into vibrant housing that meets modern green standards. We will install solar panels, implement energy-efficient glazing, and integrate rainwater harvesting systems. These measures will reduce carbon emissions by an estimated 35% and inspire similar retrofits across the district. I clicked to the first slide, before and after visuals that Nadia had curated. The contrast was stark. Boarded windows versus open vistas, debris versus polished interiors. A murmur of approval rippled. I continued. Our research indicates that similar projects have catalyzed neighborhood revitalization, increased local commerce by up to 20%, and attracted new residents seeking eco-conscious living. We're not just renovating a single unit, we're setting a precedent. Councilmember Robinson leaned forward. Ms. Hawthorne, some have raised concerns about affordability. How will you ensure this unit remains accessible? I nodded. A valid point. We've established a sliding scale lease for the first 2 years, reserving 20% of units at below market rates. After stabilization, we'll work with local nonprofits to maintain affordable housing options. My goal is equity, not exclusivity. Quote. There were nods across several council seats. I felt Malik's approving glance. Then came the toughest question, from one of the Vance twins' hired consultants, disguised as a community planner. She asked about our contingency plans if the second appraisal came in lower than our projections, hinting at financial instability. I accepted the challenge. We've arranged for a fallback financing plan underwritten by a separate investment trust. This trust ensures sufficient capital to cover shortfalls or delays. Our commitment is unconditional. Throughout, I maintained eye contact, voice steady. When I concluded, I added, "Progress requires risk, but it also demands responsibility. Hudson Heights will be a beacon, not a burden." The room fell silent for a beat, then applause rippled from supporters. Malik rose, giving me a thumbs up. After a brief council discussion, Chair Robinson called the vote. One by one, pens moved across ballots, yes, yes, yes. "Ayes have it," the chair declared. "Zoning amendment approved." A wave of relief washed over me, hot and euphoric. I stepped down, surrounded by cheers. Hands grasped mine. Marjorie's tearful hug, Raphael's grin, Layla's proud nod. Outside, the sun warmed my face as we exited. City reporters crowded us. Microphones thrust forward. A flashbulb dance captured the moment. A reporter asked, "Miss Hawthorne, how does it feel to overcome such immense challenges?" I smiled. The confidence that had been forged through every trial, solid as steel. It feels like proof that determination and integrity can reshape not just properties, but perceptions. I turned, eyes scanning the skeletal tower of Hudson Heights. This victory was more than a permit. It was permission to build dreams. Nimbus would be surprised by the progress tomorrow. The first rays of dawn caught the scaffolding like strands of gold as I unlocked the gate to Hudson Heights. Construction had already begun. Workers in hard hats moving materials, the hum of saws and drills a testament to progress. My phone lit up with messages. Marjorie confirming the bond refinancing, Layla outlining the PR rollout schedule, and Nadia coordinating with videographers for a time-lapse of the renovation. Every cog was in motion, a symphony of coordinated effort. I walked to the unit's entrance, where Jacob Chen, the project manager, waited with a clipboard. "Morning, Miss Hawthorne," he said, offering a firm handshake. "We'll start interior demo in an hour. First, we tackle the walls and wiring, then plumbing." I nodded, scanning the room. The walls, once pristine plaster, were now stripped to studs, exposing the network of pipes and conduits. Dust motes floated in the soft light, a reminder that creation often followed destruction. Before the crew assembled, I stepped onto the balcony where the river shimmered through the morning haze. I inhaled deeply, recalling the magistrate's ruling, the sway of paddles in the auction room, the echo of my name across headlines. This was the tangible aftermath of 1,000 decisions. A tap on my shoulder brought me back to the present. Raphael handed me a thick envelope. "Investor updates." He raised an eyebrow. "They want assurances our timeline will hold." I offered a steady smile. "We're on track. Send them the schedule and this morning's site plan. Emphasize our no-delay clauses." He nodded and strode off to craft the response. The crew gathered, and Jacob called the first briefing. I listened as he outlined safety protocols, work sequences, and quality standards. The language of construction had become familiar, a dialect of timelines, budgets, and deliverables. Once the workers dispersed with nods and salutations, I caught Jacob by the stairwell. "I want weekly progress reports in writing," I said. "And if anything deviates by more than 2%, notify me immediately." He nodded crisply. "Got it." I spent the rest of the morning touring the site, stopping at each station to authorize material orders. Eco-friendly drywall, low VOC paint, triple glazed windows. Each decision was a brushstroke toward the vision. A modern, sustainable residence that doubled as a symbol of resilience. At noon, I retreated to a makeshift office on the ground floor. Marjorie arrived with lunch, a spread of sandwiches and salads, and we shared a brief respite. She tasted the salad and grinned. "You're eating?" I shrugged, settling at a folding table. "Gotta keep the engine running." She nodded, opening her laptop. "The refinancing closed. Funds cleared. You're officially solvent." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Good. Now let's talk marketing." By early afternoon, Nadia had erected a tripod camera to capture demolition. A photographer from the Chronicle arrived to shoot me in the site office, clipboard, and hard hat in hand, an image of empowerment. I answered her questions casually, knowing that every quote would further mine the narrative of triumph over skepticism. Then Layla's voice came through my headset. We've got a social media spike. #Hawthorne is trending. I laughed, a sound of pure satisfaction. Tell the team to keep engagement high. Share behind-the-scenes snippets. Late in the afternoon, I looked at the skeletal beams and empty rooms and felt a surge of anticipation. Each swing of the hammer was a note in a composition I had orchestrated from a place of perceived uselessness to undeniable impact. I checked my watch, 5 p.m. Time to head to City Hall for a follow-up with the building permits office. I climbed into my car, the engine purring, and drove toward the municipal complex. As I did, texts flooded in congratulating my council victory and court triumph. The public support buoyed me, but I remained grounded in the tasks ahead. At City Hall, the chief inspector pulled me aside. I heard about your project. If everything meets code, you'll have your permits by Friday. I extended my hand. Thank you. I appreciate your help. He smiled. You're making this city proud. Driving home that evening, I replayed the day's successes in my mind. I thought of Nimbus greeting me at the door, of the progress captured on camera, of every useless whisper now a footnote in a story of transformation. Tomorrow would bring inspections, community events, and financial check-ins. But as the city lights flickered on, I felt a fierce certainty that no challenge could diminish the force of intention backed by action. They called me useless. But usefulness wasn't granted. It was earned, one plank and permit at a time. The sun was just beginning its ascent when I arrived at Hudson Heights, the scaffolding aglow with the dawn's first light. Today was inspection day. The building code officers would walk every square inch of the site, scrutinizing wiring, plumbing, structural supports. Their approval was a crucial checkpoint, a testament to our promise of quality and safety. I met Chief Inspector Ramos at the main entrance. His reputation preceded him. Meticulous, no nonsense, a stickler for the slightest deviation. He shook my hand firmly. Ms. Hawthorne, he said, scanning the half-renovated hallway. I've heard quite the story. I offered a modest smile. I hope it's a good one. He chuckled. Let's see if reality lives up to the narrative. Quote, for the next 2 hours, Ramos and his team moved like a well-practiced drill. They tested door clearances, measured window finishes, checked electrical panels against schematic diagrams. I trailed behind, notebook in hand, ready to address any issues. Most observations were minor. A missing drywall anchor here, an unsealed conduit there. I scribbled notes, dispatching Jacob to oversee corrections in real time. At noon, Ramos paused before the plumbing manifold. This project has top-tier fixtures, he noted, running a finger along the piping. But I see no backflow prevention valve. You need one to comply. I frowned. We had specified energy-efficient plumbing, but in the rush, that detail slipped past us. I nodded. We'll install it immediately. Ramos jotted it down. Once that's done, I see no reason not to pass you. Relief rippled through me. I thanked him and watched as he scribbled his final notes. By early afternoon, the required installation was complete. Ramos returned, inspected, and finally signed off. Congratulations, Ms. Hawthorne. You're clear to proceed. I exhaled, a weight lifting from my shoulders. This victory, though technical, meant everything. It translated our vision into tangible proof that we were building responsibly and with excellence. Next, I headed to a community meet-and-greet planned in the small park adjacent to Hudson Heights. Tablecloths were laid under a canopy, featuring architectural mock-ups and sustainability fact sheets. Local residents milled about, some curious, some skeptical. I arrived to greet them, handshaking and fielding questions. A young mother named Paula thanked me for the playground improvements included in our site plan. My kids need a safe space to play, she said. Her voice shook slightly. I didn't think a developer would care. I smiled warmly. I believe a building is only as strong as the community it serves. She beamed. Thank you. As the afternoon sun climbed, I mingled with local business owners, promising that the influx of residents would boost their foot traffic. I listened to a cafe owner's concerns about construction noise and assured her we'd limit drills to daytime hours. By the time the event wrapped, most attendees seemed supportive, their apprehension eased by transparency and dialogue. While I packed up the last brochures, my phone buzzed with an email alert. Urgent Hudson Heights project, change in city zoning ordinance. I frowned, opening the message to see a notice that the city council was considering adjusting zoning buffers in our area, an amendment that might require additional permits or even reduce our buildable square footage. My chest tightened. It was a curveball no one saw coming. Had this ordinance been in the works before our hearing, or was it a reaction to our project's success? Either way, it threatened to set back our timeline and balloon costs. I took a deep breath, steadying myself amid the sunny afternoon bustle. The park emptied as residents left, and Jacob approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "Everything's on schedule, until this new ordinance," he said, pointing to my phone. This could mean redesigning parts of the unit. I nodded, determination flaring. "Gather the team. Layla, get me the exact details of the proposed changes." "Marjorie, update our budget model for a worst-case scenario." "Raphael, poll our contacts at City Hall for intel." They dispersed, springing into action, and I stepped back, looking at the site map torn between blue and red ink. The momentum we'd built threatened to stall, but I knew better than to let circumstances dictate my path. I pursed my lips and closed my eyes, mentally drafting my next move: a rapid response, community outreach, and direct talks with council members to halt the ordinance. The air hummed with possibility and peril in equal measure. Another battle line was drawn, and Hudson Heights was calling me to its defense once more. The afternoon light slanted through the lobby of City Hall as I strode toward Councilmember Malik's office. My mood oscillated between pragmatism and frustration. Just when Hudson Heights felt unstoppable, new roadblocks emerged. The proposed zoning amendment trembled like a thundercloud on the horizon. Malik greeted me with a firm handshake. "Avery, good to see you. I've been briefed on the proposed ordinance." I sat across from him in his wood-paneled office, walls lined with photographs of local landmarks. "It threatens to change setback requirements and density allowances, which directly impacts our footprint." He nodded. "Yes, it's been in committee for months, but your project brought its implications into sharp relief. I've spoken against the amendment, but it needs broader support." I leaned forward. "What do you need from me?" Malik placed a stack of reports on his desk. "Community petitions, technical memos, and testimonies. And I need you to present at tomorrow's special session." My stomach tightened. Another hearing, another high-stakes performance. But I squared my shoulders. "Consider it done." I left his office with renewed purpose, adrenaline surging. First, a community petition. I tapped Nadia. "Let's compile signatures from the neighborhood today. Emphasize how the amendment jeopardizes local development." Then I met with Jacob and Layla at the site trailer. Their faces were drawn but resolute. "We need a technical memo by tonight," Layla said, laying out her laptop. "Engineers need to quantify the impact." Jacob produced preliminary structural analysis. "We'll need to restructure the east wing if the setback increases by 5 feet. I scribbled notes. "Angle the memo to show cost overruns and delays could lead to foreclosure." Jacob paled but nodded. "I'll get the numbers." Next, I organized a rapid response community meeting at a nearby cafe. Residents gathered, coffee cups in hand, brows furrowed at headlines of bureaucratic overreach. I stepped up and explained. This ordinance wasn't designed with our context in mind. It's a one-size-fits-all approach that punishes revitalization efforts. I passed around a petition tablet. Within an hour, we had over 200 signatures. Neighbors, local business owners, even some who'd initially voiced concerns. Their support felt tangible, a reminder that genuine engagement breeds solidarity. Back at home, I drafted my speech, succinct, data-backed, and human. I practiced in front of the mirror until each line felt like muscle memory. The next morning, I arrived at the council chamber, petition in hand. The special session was packed. Opposition voices echoed concerns about overdevelopment. But when I spoke, the room grew still. Council Chair Robinson, fellow council members, I began, voice resonating with conviction. This amendment, though well-intentioned, fails to consider the nuanced needs of individual properties. My project at Hudson Heights is a case study. Forced setbacks would impede critical infrastructure improvements and displace the very tenants we seek to serve. I presented the petition and technical memo, my slides showing projected cost increases of 18% and timeline delays up to 6 months. I paused to let the data sink in. But more importantly, I continued, this ordinance threatens to undermine the community's trust in development initiatives. When residents rally behind revitalization, we must heed their voices. I stand here not just as an investor, but as a neighbor committed to this district's prosperity. Councilmember Malik rose to second my motion. Another member followed. Murmurs turned to consensus. The chair called the vote. Ayes have it, the chair declared. The amendment failed. A swell of applause erupted. I exhaled, relief surging. Malik slapped me on the back. You nailed it. As we exited, a city reporter asked, Ms. Hawthorne, did you expect such strong opposition? I smiled. Progress meets resistance. It's up to us to show why it matters. The day was won, but challenges remained. Permits to finalize, construction milestones to hit, investors to appease. Yet every victory reinforced my belief that strategy and community alignment could surmount any obstacle. That evening, I returned to Hudson Heights, climbing the temporary stairs to the half-renovated balcony. The skyline glowed in twilight. I closed my eyes and let the wind carry away the day's tension. They called me useless. But tonight, I stood proof that one voice, backed by purpose and perseverance, could steer the course of progress. The final coat of primer had dried only hours ago, yet Hudson Heights hummed with anticipation. I arrived at dawn to find the finishing crew already in motion. Painters adding color, electricians installing smart lighting, and flooring specialists fitting the eco-friendly bamboo planks I'd insisted upon. Each brushstroke and tile click carried me closer to unveiling the transformation that had been months in the making. I stepped into what would soon be the living area, running my hand along the cool glass of the new windows. The panoramic river view stretched before me, framed by sleek black mullions. I could almost see future residents, couples, young professionals, perhaps even a retired couple, drawn by the quiet elegance of the design, gazing out just as I was now. My phone buzzed, a text from Marjorie. Numbers look good, but equity partners want a mid-project recap. They're meeting tomorrow at 10. I typed back, prepare slides on budget versus actuals, timeline adherence, and marketing metrics. I'll review this afternoon. Next, I met with Nadia in the showroom area we'd set up. Half the space was staged with contemporary furniture on loan from a local boutique. Nadia waved her tablet. Our teaser campaign has garnered 15,000 impressions, 20% above target. Engagement's climbing. I nodded, impressed. Schedule a virtual tour launch next week, and let's finalize the open house event for 2 Saturdays from now. It needs to feel exclusive. She tapped her tablet. Save the date invites go out tonight. Between overseeing trim work and approving fixtures, I slipped away to meet with Raphael, who had uncovered a worrying development. We sat in my temporary office, a laptop, blueprints, and fabric samples when he spoke. I got a call from the escrow company. There's an issue. A lien from a subcontractor in another project you were tangentially involved in. It was supposed to have been cleared. Now they're threatening to put a claim on the property. My heart sank. A leftover dispute from a prior engagement? The Vance twins would surely exploit this to derail our closing. I exhaled and steepled my fingers. How serious is it? He rubbed his neck. If we don't clear it within 48 hours, they can file a notice of claim, and that could freeze our escrow accounts. The weight of that possibility hit me like a tidal wave. Months of effort could unravel in bureaucratic red tape. I stood and paced. Contact the subcontractor's attorney immediately. Find out what paperwork or payment stalls the release. I'll personally authorize any legitimate invoice. Then, draft a notice to the escrow officer confirming the lien dispute resolution plan. Raphael nodded, already tapping away on his phone. I grabbed my keys and headed to the billing office of the subcontractor in question, a small sign painter's workshop in an industrial park. When I arrived, the owner, Mr. Chen, looked surprised to see me. "Miss Hawthorne," he began, eyebrows raised. "I didn't expect a visit." I offered a firm handshake. "I'm here to resolve the outstanding lien on Hudson Heights. It was never my intention to leave it unsettled." His expression softened. "My son handled that project and, well, we never got the final payment on the mural. We filed the lien last month." I nodded. "Let's settle it today." Inside his cluttered office, we reviewed invoices and work orders. After a brief negotiation, I agreed to cover the outstanding balance, plus a goodwill premium, for the inconvenience. He signed a lien release, and I ensured the cashier's check was ready for next-day deposit. By the time I left, dusk had tinted the sky. Relief mingled with fatigue. Another crisis averted, but the lessons of due diligence and prompt resolution were seared into my mind. Back at Hudson Heights, I handed the signed release to Raphael. "File it with the escrow company and notify the title insurer." He breathed out. "Got it." I surveyed the staging. The space was almost complete, yet that nibbling anxiety in my chest reminded me that every victory brought new tests. I checked my watch. 6:30 p.m. I had just enough time to change and make it to a networking dinner with potential equity partners. Dressed in a sleek navy suit, I arrived at the dimly lit restaurant where round tables were set beneath exposed brick arches. Investors mingled, glasses clinking. I moved through the crowd, shaking hands and sharing snippets of our progress. I wove in anecdotes of our legal triumphs and community victories, painting a picture of resilience that captured their interest. When I sat for dinner, the lead equity partner, Miss Silva, leaned in. "Avery, I admire how you've handled every setback. But tell me, how do you plan to scale this model if the Vance twins decide to counterattack?" I met her gaze confidently. "We've laid the groundwork for a replicable approach, rigorous due diligence, community-first engagement, and adaptive financing structures. Their empire may be bigger, but our agility and ethical foundation give us the edge in niche redevelopment." She nodded, swirling her wine. "I like that. We'll discuss terms next week." Walking back to my car, I felt the cool night air wrap around me. Tomorrow would bring investor presentations, interior design approvals, and final escrow sign-offs. And somewhere in the shadows, the Vance twins and any lingering adversaries would plot their next move. But as I drove away, the city lights reflected in my rearview mirror like stars caught in glass. I realized that every challenge, every misstep, and every triumph had forged the path to this moment, a moment where usefulness transcended perception. They called me useless. But usefulness, I'd learned, was the power to prevail when it mattered most. There's a strange serenity to the early morning hours when the city sleeps but the mind races. I arrived at Hudson Heights before dawn, the site enveloped in chill and silence. Only the occasional flicker of security lights and faint hum of generators broke the quiet. This was the calm before the storm, the final week before the grand opening. Today's agenda was a marathon of tasks: final escrow sign-offs, media walkthroughs, interior designer approvals, and a final board meeting with equity partners. I parked at the curb and took a moment to breathe, feeling the crisp air clear the fog from my thoughts. Nimbus would have loved a fall morning like this, but I had a duty to the living building humming behind me. First stop, the escrow office. The receptionist guided me through gleaming halls to a private conference room where the escrow officer, Ms. Carter, awaited. Her desk brimmed with documents, a testament to the intricate ballet of legal and financial threads I'd woven. She offered a warm smile and gestured to a leather armchair. "Ms. Hawthorne, everything appears in order, except one final signature on the title indemnity form," she said, sliding the document across the polished oak table. "Once you sign, we'll release the final funds." I leaned forward and signed. The pens glide across paper, echoing like the final chord of a symphony. Ms. Carter countersigned, and with a flourish, slid a sealed envelope toward me. "Congratulations," she said. "The deed is clear and the mortgage recorded in your name." I exhaled, relief blooming. "Thank you." Outside, the sun peeked over the horizon, casting a golden glow across the city. Next, I raced to Hudson Heights show unit, the model floor where potential residents would soon tour. Nadia was already there alongside the videographer crew, filming last-minute teasers. She greeted me with a grin and handed over her tablet. Our final cut will go live in 2 hours. I reviewed the video. Fluid camera movements, sweeping vistas, close-ups of the sleek cabinetry I'd handpicked. It was a visual portrait of triumph, each frame whispering possibility. Perfect, I said. Schedule it to premiere at noon. I want live reactions from our social feed to boost momentum. She tapped the screen. It's set. By mid-morning, I convened with the interior designer Sophia Lang in the dining area of the show unit. Lights streamed through triple-glazed windows, illuminating the textured backsplash she'd installed. We walked through fabric swatches for upholstery and debated pendant lighting intensity. Every choice was a brushstroke in a final masterpiece, every detail a declaration of holistic design. As Sophia tested light temperatures, my phone buzzed. An urgent text from Marjorie. Equity Partners want a mid-cycle financial recap before closing next week. Quote, I nodded to Sophia. I need an hour to handle investor materials. She smiled understandingly and continued her adjustments. I slipped into the site office and joined the video call with investors, sharing the latest balance sheets, projected cash flows, and occupancy forecasts. Their questions were pointed. What's the absorption rate? What are your targets for leasing within 90 days? How will you mitigate market fluctuations? I fielded each with precision, my voice calm but assertive. By the end of the call, the lead partner, Ms. Silva, leaned forward. Avery, your clarity and command of data reassure us. We'll move forward with the final tranche as scheduled. I allowed myself a small smile. Thank you. I look forward to delivering on our promises. I then dashed outside through the construction perimeter to meet Layla at the local press office. She had arranged for a preview of the Financial Chronicle's feature story, the long-form article that traced my journey from underappreciated assistant to real estate powerhouse. The reporter had captured the human narrative alongside the financial milestones. Layla handed me the printed spread. The headline read, When Determination Wrote the Mortgage, Avery Hawthorne's Unlikely Ascent. I scanned the first paragraphs and felt a warmth blooming. This was more than publicity. It was recognition of every uphill struggle. We returned to Hudson Heights, just as the first wave of social media notifications hit, likes, shares, comments flooding in. At noon, Nadia cued the video trailer. We watched on a makeshift projector as the footage played across bare walls. Demolition to delivery, courtroom to community, risk to reward. When the final frame closed on my silhouette gazing out over the river, the crew erupted into applause. I forced myself to stay in the moment, to internalize the culmination of every trial. The afternoon blurred into a frenzy. I signed the lease agreements with 2 prospective tenants. One, a young couple seeking an urban escape. Another, a nonprofit organization wanting to subsidize a portion of the building for transitional housing. Each signature on the dotted line felt like a promise kept. As the sun dipped low, I gathered my team on the balcony, where construction lights bathed the building in a warm glow. Marjorie, Raphael, Layla, Jacob, Sophia, and Nadia stood with me, their faces alight with shared triumph. I raised my glass of sparkling water. To the power of perseverance, I said, voice carrying, to turning doubt into opportunity. Thank you for believing in a vision that began with a single bid. They echoed the toast, and for a moment, time held steady, a tableau of unity and victory. But as I watched them disperse into the descending night, I couldn't shake the knowledge that new challenges always lurked beyond each horizon. Yet I felt ready. They called me useless, and every step I had taken disproved that claim. Tomorrow, the official grand opening. The day after, refinancing. And beyond that, a blueprint for the next project. Because usefulness was not a title, it was impact. The grand unveiling day dawned bright and clear, with a crisp breeze carrying the promise of change. I arrived early at Hudson Heights, the building's sleek facade gleaming like a beacon of possibility. Banners fluttered by the entrance, Welcome Home and Hudson Heights Grand Opening. In the plaza, a small stage had been erected with a podium and city council flags. courtesy of Councilmember Malik's office. My phone buzzed, Nimbus's daily update from the pet sitter. I refused to leave him out of the victory lap, and I smiled before turning to greet the arriving dignitaries and potential residents. The press tent buzzed with camera crews, their lenses trained on me as I navigated through handshakes and friendly introductions. Marjorie appeared with my coffee, black, no sugar, and handed it over with a knowing grin. "You look like you need this." I thanked her, taking a sip of the warm brew. Even on this celebratory morning, my mind was already 3 steps ahead. Logistics of the ribbon cutting, post-event cocktails, and coordinating lease move-ins. At precisely 10 a.m., Councilmember Malik introduced me at the podium. The crowd hushed as he spoke of civic renewal and championed the sustainable model Avery Hawthorne had demonstrated. Then he turned to me. "Ms. Hawthorne, the stage is yours." I stepped up, heart pounding but steady. I looked out at the assembled faces, smiling residents, curious neighbors, local business owners, my team standing behind me with proud expressions. I inhaled deeply and began. "Thank you, Councilmember Malik, and thank you all for being here today. Hudson Heights is more than a building. It's a testament to resilience, collaboration, and belief in possibility. When I first bid on this property," I allowed a small laugh, "I was told I was useless. Today, my name is on a mortgage that transformed this space into a home for many." Applause rippled through the crowd. I continued. "This project was never just about cement and glass. It was about community, our community, and how we lifted each other. From the legal battles to the zoning hearings, every step was driven by a vision that once seemed impossible. But visions become reality when they're grounded in purpose and perseverance." I gestured to the building behind me. Hudson Heights now houses 24 apartments, including dedicated units for affordable housing, all powered by renewable energy and designed for sustainability. It represents our shared values and our commitment to innovation. With a nod to Malik, I reached for the oversized scissors on the podium. The ribbon trembled slightly as I positioned the blades across its satin surface. "On 3, I said, smiling. 1, 2, 3. The scissors cut through with a soft snip, and the ribbon fell away. The crowd cheered, and I stepped aside as Malik and I led the procession inside. Flashbulbs popped as we crossed the threshold. Inside, the warm wood floors, the soft natural light, and the harmonious blend of modern design greeted us. Guests toured the show unit, marveling at the triple-glazed windows, the open-concept kitchen, and the smart home features I'd championed. I took a moment alone in the living room, closing my eyes. 6 months ago, this was a foreclosure file. Today, it was a thriving residence. I could almost hear Nimbus purring by my side. The day's ceremony segued into a rooftop reception. Under a clear sky, we toasted success with sparkling cider. My team gathered around as I raised my glass. "To the power of purpose," I said, "to proving that usefulness is not a label to accept, but a legacy to build." As the sun dipped beyond the river horizon, I cast my gaze over Hudson Heights. Every office meeting, every legal brief, every risk taken had led to this moment. I felt a deep contentment, tempered by the realization that this was the beginning, not the end. Tomorrow, the first residents move in. And after that, a fresh blueprint awaits. Another building, another community, another opportunity to transform doubt into achievement. But for now, I reveled in the truth that had defined my journey. They called me useless. Yet through determination and faith in my own worth, I had made them see my name on their mortgage. The morning after the grand opening, Hudson Heights buzzed with real activity. Moving vans, unpacking furniture, contractors tweaking final adjustments, and concierge staff welcoming the first wave of residents. I arrived early, eager to witness how my vision translated into everyday life. In the lobby, I found Paula, the young mother from the park meeting, balancing a stroller and a cardboard box. She saw me, her face lighting up. "Ms. Hawthorne, I can't tell you how grateful I am. My son loves the playground right outside, and our apartment, it's like a dream." I knelt by her side. "I'm glad you're happy. Let me know if there's anything you need." She nodded, tears brimming. "This changes everything for us." That moment underscored the impact beyond bricks and mortar. This was a home, not just a project. I felt a surge of pride tempered by responsibility. Each resident's well-being was now part of my ongoing duty. Next, I toured the communal rooftop garden, now lush with planters of herbs and flowers. Raphael waved from behind a watering can. "Take a look," he called out. I walked among the greenery, inhaling the scent of basil and lavender. Solar lanterns dotted the paths, and wind chimes tinkled in a gentle breeze. A group of neighbors chatted at a communal table, sipping coffee and admiring the view. "It's perfect," I said. He grinned. "You've created a real community." My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder, 30-day post-opening review with Marjorie and investors. I slipped away to my office to prepare. The room was modest, a desk, a laptop, and framed photos from key moments. Auction day, courtroom victory, ribbon cutting. Marjorie dialed in first. Equity partners want a deeper dive into early financials and occupancy data. I shared our current stats: 8 leases signed, healthy rent returns, and positive resident feedback. The partners expressed satisfaction, but requested updated forecasting scenarios for year-end. I fielded their questions on market downturn contingencies and risk mitigation, reassuring them that our conservative financing and strong tenant profile would weather fluctuations. Their buying nods and closing remarks signaled trust reaffirmed. Afterward, I met with Sophia, the interior designer, to plan the next wave of building enhancements, custom art installations in the lobby, and upgraded security systems. As we discussed color palettes and lighting placements, I realized the project's evolution would never truly end. Continuous improvement was baked into success. Later, I hosted a small event in the community room for local business owners, a networking brunch with pastries from the cafe next door, which had benefited from increased patronage. The cafe owner, Mr. Patel, raised a toast to Avery Hawthorne for not only reshaping a building, but reshaping lives. Applause and cheers filled the room. I choked back emotion, stepping to the microphone. "This was a collaborative effort, and I'm honored to share it with you," I said. "Let's continue to build on this momentum, support each other, and make this neighborhood thrive." The toast became a pledge, an ongoing partnership between residents, businesses, and stakeholders. That evening, I returned home to find a package on my doorstep. Inside was a brick-sized book, fresh off the press, an e-book version of the Financial Chronicle article, complete with my story and investor insights. It felt surreal to leaf through pages that chronicled my journey from underestimation to empowerment. As I sipped tea and flipped through the pages, my mind drifted to the next horizon, identifying the next undervalued property, mobilizing a new team, and repeating the cycle of transformation. Usefulness, I knew now, wasn't a one-time achievement. It was a continuous act of creation, adaptation, and community building. They called me useless. But my name wasn't just on a mortgage. It was etched into the hearts of a community I helped to build. Morning light filtered through my living room window as I reviewed the latest market reports, interest rates, rental demand forecasts, and property valuation trends. Hudson Heights had proven that resilience could outshine risk, but the industry had already shifted under my feet. My next move required both vision and vigilance. I poured coffee and settled at my desk, pulling up the digital blueprint of a new opportunity. The old riverside warehouses, long abandoned and slated for demolition. Their location, just across the river, held untapped potential. The underused industrial space could transform into loft apartments and creative studios. I traced my finger across the map, imagining open floor plans, shared workspaces, and a public market on the ground floor. A ping on my phone interrupted my thoughts. It was Layla. I found a recurring lien issue with the warehouse's title. It might take some negotiating. I nodded, jotting a reminder to address title clearance. My mind then turned to the community. Could I rally the same grassroots support? I tapped out a message to Councilmember Malik. Request meeting Riverside Project. Next, I opened a new document to draft a project plan. Scope, financing, sustainability measures. The Riverside Project would be bigger in scale and complexity. I outlined green roofs, urban gardens, and a rooftop solar array. In the margins, I noted potential partner profiles, nonprofit arts organizations, local entrepreneurs, and small-scale retailers. Nimbus's meow at my door reminded me to feed him. Life needed balance, even in the whirlwind of expansion. I scratched behind his ears, then returned to my desk to draft an email to my investor group. an executive summary of Riverside proposal, with projected IRR and community impact statements. By midday, I was on site at the old warehouses. The chain-link fences bore signs warning of danger and trespassing. I walked the perimeter with Jacob, who shook his head at the crumbling brickwork. "This'll need stabilization," he said, running his hands over a corroding steel beam. "Costs could skyrocket." I met his gaze. "We'll budget for structural reinforcement. The risk is worth the reward." We snapped photos for the feasibility study, noting every hazard and highlighting architectural salvage potential, exposed brick walls, old wooden rafters. Back in my car, I called Raphael. "Update the financial model with reinforcement costs. Then let's schedule a round of calls with the title company and lien holders." He confirmed and hung up. The rest of the afternoon was a blur of calls and meetings. Layla outlining legal steps, Sophia sketching design concepts, Nadia prepping a social campaign teasing the Riverside reveal, from ruins to rooftops. As sunset approached, I stood on my balcony at Hudson Heights, watching the river reflect the changing sky. The success of this first project fueled a hunger for the next challenge. They called me useless. But each project reaffirmed that usefulness wasn't static. It was a driving force for renewal. Tomorrow, I'd set the wheels in motion for Riverside. The night before my presentation to the Riverside Partnership Group, I barely slept. My mind replayed every detail: the pitch deck's flow, the community benefits slide, the contingency financing plan. I could almost taste the adrenaline pulsing through my veins. By dawn, I was up and reviewing notes in my apartment study, Nimbus curled on a cushion at my feet, a quiet companion amid the tension. I arrived at the Riverside warehouse site in the early morning light, the graffiti-strewn walls and broken-paned windows standing in stark contrast to the sleek lines of Hudson Heights. I met with Layla at the fenced entrance. "They've got the meeting scheduled at 9 a.m. sharp," she said, her voice measured. "About 20 stakeholders and potential investors will attend. They'll expect professionalism and a compelling vision." I nodded. "We deliver both." I led Layla and Raphael through the cavernous interior, brushing dust from a rusted steel beam. Beams of sunlight sifted through the broken glass, illuminating motes that danced like embers in the air. The potential was visceral. Soaring ceilings, sprawling floor plates, and a waterfront location that begged for public access. At 8:30, I unlocked the back door of a neighboring community center that had graciously lent their hall for the pitch. Inside, long tables bore name cards: city officials, community leaders, nonprofit directors, and private investors. Coffee urns steamed at the side, and a projector stood ready at the front. I took a deep breath and slipped into the chair at the head of the table. One by one, the attendees arrived. Councilmember Malik gave me a thumbs up as he took his seat. Next came Mr. Patel from the cafe, and then representatives from the local arts collective. Raphael stationed himself by the projector, ready to advance slides at my cue. At precisely 9 a.m., I stood and nodded. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time to explore the Riverside Warehouses project. I'm Avery Hawthorne, and I believe this space can become a vibrant hub, connecting sustainable housing, creative industry, and community gathering spaces." I clicked to the first slide, an aerial map showing the warehouse's proximity to public transit and the riverfront. These buildings have been dormant far too long. Our proposal: convert the main warehouse into 30 loft apartments, with half dedicated to below-market rents. The adjacent structure will house studios and workshop spaces for artists and makers, subsidized through partnership with the Riverside Arts Collective. Heads nodded. I continued, pacing the timeline: due diligence through rezoning, environmental remediation of contaminated soils, structural reinforcement, and phased occupancy. I acknowledged the legal complexities, including outstanding liens. We'll resolve these through escrowed reserves and direct negotiations, ensuring a clear title by closing. Layla stepped in, detailing the proposed financing stack, a combination of low-interest municipal bonds, private equity, and a crowd-funded community investment vehicle that allowed local residents to own a piece of the project. She highlighted tax credits for historic preservation and green building certifications that would bolster our rate of return. Next, I presented the community impact metrics: 50 new permanent jobs during renovation, 200 indirect jobs in local services, and a projected $5 million in annual economic spin-off for local businesses. The arts nonprofit director leaned forward, clearly intrigued. When we opened for questions, the noise was constructive. A council aide asked about traffic mitigation, and I described our partnership with the city's transportation agency to add bike lanes and upgrade sidewalks. A local resident worried about noise. I explained sound dampening modifications and restricted workshop hours. The final question came from a skeptical private investor. Ms. Hawthorne, what makes you confident this project won't repeat the mistakes of past developers? Defaults, half-finished builds. I paused, meeting each pair of eyes. Because this time, I said, voice steady, we've built on experience. My team and I navigated legal injunctions, community battles, and financing crises to complete Hudson Heights. We've honed processes for stakeholder engagement, contingency funding, and risk management. This isn't speculative. It's the next chapter in a proven blueprint. Silence hung for a moment before Malik rose. I moved to support this project as outlined. Others followed. The vote was unanimous. The hall broke into applause. Relief and exhilaration surged. I shook hands all around, gratitude lighting every smile. As I packed up my materials, Raphael slipped into the aisle. They want term sheets by Friday. I nodded. Let's get to work. Outside, the riverside breeze felt invigorating. I walked back to the warehouses, envisioning scaffolding, hoists, and life returning to the vacant halls. This was more than another project. It was a statement. Avery Hawthorne's evolution from an assistant labeled useless to a visionary developer reshaping entire neighborhoods. That evening, I sat on my balcony, laptop open, drafting the first term sheet. My fingers danced across the keyboard while the city lights twinkled beneath me. I paused to watch a barge drift along the river, fleeting but purposeful, much like my journey. Tomorrow would bring another set of challenges: title negotiations, environmental reports, detailed architectural plans. But as I glanced at Nimbus curled asleep on his cushion, I knew I was ready. They called me useless. But with each project, I proved that usefulness was not just a measure of tasks performed, it was a force for transformation. The night before my presentation to the Riverside Partnership Group, I barely slept. My mind replayed every detail: the pitch deck's flow, the community benefits slide, the contingency financing plan. I could almost taste the adrenaline pulsing through my veins. By dawn, I was up and reviewing notes in my apartment study, Nimbus curled on a cushion at my feet, a quiet companion amid the tension. I arrived at the Riverside warehouse site in the early morning light, the graffiti-strewn walls and broken-paned windows standing in stark contrast to the sleek lines of Hudson Heights. I met with Layla at the fenced entrance. They've got the meeting scheduled at 9 a.m. sharp, she said, her voice measured. About 20 stakeholders and potential investors will attend. They'll expect professionalism and a compelling vision. I nodded. We deliver both. I led Layla and Raphael through the cavernous interior, brushing dust from a rusted steel beam. Beams of sunlight sifted through the broken glass, illuminating motes that danced like embers in the air. The potential was visceral. Soaring ceilings, sprawling floor plates, and a waterfront location that begged for public access. At 8:30, I unlocked the back door of a neighboring community center that had graciously lent their hall for the pitch. Inside, long tables bore name cards: city officials, community leaders, nonprofit directors, and private investors. Coffee urns steamed at the side, and a projector stood ready at the front. I took a deep breath and slipped into the chair at the head of the table. One by one, the attendees arrived. Councilmember Malik gave me a thumbs up as he took his seat. Next came Mr. Gayas Patel from the cafe, and then representatives from the local arts collective. Raphael stationed himself by the projector, ready to advance slides at my cue. At precisely 9 a.m., I stood and nodded. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time to explore the Riverside Warehouses project. I'm Avery Hawthorne, and I believe this space can become a vibrant hub, connecting sustainable housing, creative industry, and community gathering spaces. I clicked to the first slide, an aerial map showing the warehouse's proximity to public transit and the riverfront. These buildings have been dormant far too long. Our proposal: convert the main warehouse into 30 loft apartments, with half dedicated to below-market rents. The adjacent structure will house studios and workshop spaces for artists and makers, subsidized through partnership with the Riverside Arts Collective. Heads nodded. I continued, pacing the timeline. Due diligence through rezoning, environmental remediation of contaminated soils, structural reinforcement, and phased occupancy. I acknowledged the legal complexities, including outstanding liens. We'll resolve these through escrowed reserves and direct negotiations, ensuring a clear title by closing. Layla stepped in, detailing the proposed financing stack, a combination of low-interest municipal bonds, private equity, and a crowd-funded community investment vehicle that allowed local residents to own a piece of the project. She highlighted tax credits for historic preservation and green building certifications that would bolster our rate of return. Next, I presented the community impact metrics: 50 new permanent jobs during renovation, 200 indirect jobs in local services, and a projected $5 million in annual economic spin-off for local businesses. The arts nonprofit director leaned forward, clearly intrigued. When we opened for questions, the noise was constructive. A council aide asked about traffic mitigation, and I described our partnership with the city's transportation agency to add bike lanes and upgrade sidewalks. A local resident worried about noise. I explained sound dampening modifications and restricted workshop hours. The final question came from a skeptical private investor. Ms. Hawthorne, what makes you confident this project won't repeat the mistakes of past developers? Defaults, half-finished builds. I paused, meeting each pair of eyes. Because this time, I said, voice steady, we've built on experience. My team and I navigated legal injunctions, community battles, and financing crises to complete Hudson Heights. We've honed processes for stakeholder engagement, contingency funding, and risk management. This isn't speculative. It's the next chapter in a proven blueprint. Silence hung for a moment before Malik rose. I moved to support this project as outlined. Others followed. The vote was unanimous. The hall broke into applause. Relief and exhilaration surged. I shook hands all around, gratitude lighting every smile. As I packed up my materials, Raphael slipped into the aisle. They want term sheets by Friday. I nodded. Let's get to work. Outside, the riverside breeze felt invigorating. I walked back to the warehouses, envisioning scaffolding, hoists, and life returning to the vacant halls. This was more than another project. It was a statement. Avery Hawthorne's evolution from an assistant labeled useless to a visionary developer reshaping entire neighborhoods. That evening, I sat on my balcony, laptop open, drafting the first term sheet. My fingers danced across the keyboard while the city lights twinkled beneath me. I paused to watch a barge drift along the river, fleeting but purposeful, much like my journey. Tomorrow would bring another set of challenges: title negotiations, environmental reports, detailed architectural plans. But as I glanced at Nimbus curled asleep on his cushion, I knew I was ready. They called me useless. But with each project, I proved that usefulness was not just a measure of tasks performed. It was a force for transformation. The morning sunlight filtered through the high windows of the Riverside warehouse, illuminating motes of dust and the intricate steel lattice overhead. It felt almost sacred, an industrial cathedral awaiting rebirth. I stepped inside, heart swelling with purpose, as my team unfurled the detailed site plans across a folding table set up amidst the empty floor. Layla tapped the plans with her pen. We've got final environmental reports, she announced. Soil contaminants are within tolerable limits, but we need remediation in Zone C near the loading dock. I nodded, scanning the marked area. Contract the specialists today. I want a remediation schedule by end of day. Meanwhile, Raphael handed me the updated term sheets. Investors are on board pending final title clearance. There's a pending rights claim from a long-forgotten lease. We'll need to negotiate a buyout or reversion. Quote, I traced the parcel boundaries. Call the title company, get that claim resolved quickly, then send the amended term sheets to investors. My phone buzzed. Councilmember Malik's office, a last-minute summit at City Hall to address concerns from the local historical society. They feared the warehouse's heritage would be lost. I sighed. Another hearing. But this time, I was prepared. At the Historical Society's Grand Hall, I presented the preservation plan: maintain original facade, repurpose salvaged timber, and create an on-site museum corner with artifacts and plaques detailing the building's industrial past. I even proposed supporting their annual Heritage Festival with the warehouse as a venue. Their treasurer, Ms. Edmonds, leaned forward. "This is beyond what we expected. You're preserving our history while giving it new life." I smiled. "This space will honor the past as it serves the future." They endorsed our plan unanimously. Back at the warehouse, I walked the length of the main hall, picturing the demolition crews clearing debris, the remediation teams working in protective gear, and, eventually, tenants filling the space with life. I breathed in the stale air, envisioning fresh paint, polished floors, and the hum of creative energy. That afternoon, I convened a video call with the sustainability consultants. We finalized the green roof design, native sedum plantings, solar panel arrays angled for optimal efficiency, and a rainwater capture system feeding the rooftop garden. These features would earn us LEED Gold certification and reduce operating costs significantly. As the call ended, I leaned back, feeling the weight of responsibility and exhilaration. The world was watching. Tenants anticipating new homes, artists awaiting studio space, investors tracking every milestone. Before leaving the site, I placed a hand on a steel column near the center of the hall. "Thank you," I whispered, not to the metal but to every moment. Every doubter, every late night, every risk that brought me here. Driving home through twilight-lit streets, I paused at a red light and looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Lines had formed at the corners of my eyes, lines etched by determination, sleepless resolve, and the unyielding drive to prove my worth. They called me useless. But in the echo of empty halls and in the promise of transformed spaces, I had become indispensable, an architect of possibility. The Riverside project had reached its crescendo of activity. Scaffolding embraced the old brick walls, remediation crews moved earth beneath tarps, and equipment hummed through the cavernous halls. I arrived mid-morning, greeted by Jacob's handshake and the sight of Layla poring over title documents. "Everything cleared," she announced, handing me the stamped release from the title company. "No further claims." I exhaled, my shoulders relaxing for the first time in weeks. "Excellent. Let's finalize the term sheets for signature." We convened in the site office, the walls plastered with mood boards and blueprints. Raphael dialed in the equity partners from New York and London, their faces appearing on a large screen. I guided them through the final numbers: cost controls, projected rental yields, and phased occupancy targets. They asked about our contingency reserves and long-term capital improvements, and I fielded every question with precision. At the meeting's close, the lead partner said, "Avery, your command over every detail reassures us we're ready to sign." A chorus of agreements followed, and I felt a surge of triumph as digital signatures filled the shared document. Next, I shifted gears to the technical realm, meeting with the structural engineers in the main hall. They demonstrated the reinforcement design, a network of cross-bracing and carbon fiber wraps to stabilize the aging steel. Watching them mapped out the skeletal outlines on the concrete floor, I visualized the building's bones strengthened for decades to come. Meanwhile, the Arts Collective arrived to assess the space. The director, Maya, wandered through the open studios, her eyes alight. "Perfect scale and lighting," she enthused. "Artists will flock here." I guided her to the gallery corner we'd reserved for rotating exhibitions. "We'll install gallery lighting and museum-grade display cases. Let's plan an inaugural show featuring local talent." She nodded, already sketching ideas in her notebook. Just past noon, I stepped into the courtyard, where the rooftop garden team had set up a demonstration plot of native plants. The horticulturist pointed out sedum varieties thriving under simulated rainwater feeds. The solar technicians adjusted panel angles to maximize exposure. Everything was in motion, yet I sensed the ticking clock toward our soft opening next month. That afternoon, I hosted a site-wide safety drill with the construction supervisor. We walked through emergency protocols, fire exits, first aid stations, ensuring that every individual on site knew the plan. As the whistle blew to signal the drill's end, I gathered the team. Safety and quality define us as much as vision. Stay vigilant. They saluted, and I moved to wrap up my day. Walking through the half-renovated gallery space, I paused to absorb the light filtering through new windows. Each plank of salvaged wood, each column of reinforced steel, each chosen plant was part of a narrative. One of a project born from doubt, yet realized through deliberation and determination. The air buzzed with possibility. Studios hummed with creative brainstorming, leasing agents toured prospective tenants, and the community center next door prepared to partner on public workshops within the space. I exhaled, feeling the weight of weeks lift slightly. Part of me wanted to pause, to savor the near completion of a dream, but another part told me the next chapter was already unfolding. Because usefulness is not a trophy to display, it's an ongoing journey of impact. The night air was thick with autumn's promise as I unlocked the door to the show apartment at Hudson Heights. This evening I hosted a joint mixer for both Hudson and Riverside project stakeholders, a blend of current residents, future tenants, investors, and community partners. It was a fusion of past achievement and future aspiration. Soft music drifted from concealed speakers as guests strolled through the furnished living room, kitchen, and balcony. The scent of hors d'oeuvre, locally sourced cheeses and artisanal breads, wafted through the open concept space. I greeted each arrival with a warm smile, feeling the buzz of conversations affirm the value of my work. Councilmember Malik approached, nodding in approval. "I can't believe how far this has come," he said. "Incredible work." I thanked him, gesturing to a small group absorbed in discussion around the neighborhood bakery owner, Mr. Patel, and Maya from the Arts Collective. Plans were forming for a waterfront weekend market under the Riverside Arches and a permanent gallery rotation at Hudson Heights. Nearby, Marjorie was leaning over a high-top table with investors, reviewing updated yield curves on her tablet. Raphael and Layla flanked me, a silent show of solidarity. As the night deepened, I excused myself to a quieter corner, pulling out my phone to send a late-night memo to the legal team, finalize lease revisions, and prepare the closing documents for Riverside investors. Just as I hit send, my phone rang. An unknown number. I answered. "Hawthorne." A low voice emerged. "Don't think your victories will go unchecked." My pulse quickened. "Who is this?" A chuckle. "You'll see soon enough." The line went dead. My blood ran cold. Could this be a threat from the Vance twins? Or a loner upset by renovation noise? Either way, it was a stark reminder that ambition often courts resistance. I pocketed my phone and returned to the gathering. No one noticed my shift in mood as I stepped onto the balcony, gazing at the illuminated city skyline. Hudson Heights windows glowed like constellations, and across the river, scaffolding at Riverside caught the moonlight. I reflected on the journey, the auction, the court battles, community hearings, construction milestones, investor dinners, and now, this moment of communal celebration. Each chapter had fortified me, yet a sense of vulnerability remained. That phone call was a nudge, proof that the world of high-stakes development was never without shadows. I rejoined Marjorie and Raphael. That was unsettling, I admitted quietly. Raphael's brow furrowed. "We'll trace the call and tighten security protocols." Marjorie placed a hand on my arm. "You've faced worse. We'll handle it." I nodded, drawing strength from their presence. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and networking. As the mixer wound down, I stood by the doorway, bidding farewell to the last guests. Nimbus would be waiting at home, a comforting reminder of simpler bonds. Once alone, I walked the empty halls of Hudson Heights, the soft carpet underfoot and the distant hum of the city below. I paused before Unit B12's door, my first conquest. I ran my hand along the nameplate I'd affixed, Avery Hawthorne, Principal. A memory surfaced, my boss's dismissive whisper of useless. I smiled at the irony. That word had once sought to confine me. Now it served as motivation. I exited into the chilly night, locking the door behind me. Tomorrow would bring the final month of renovations at Riverside, lease signings at Hudson, and an investigation into the cryptic threat. They called me useless. But usefulness wasn't a static award. It was the evolution of resilience in the face of any shadow. The first light of dawn broke across the skyline, casting Hudson Heights and the skeletal riverside warehouses in a soft, hopeful glow. I felt a surge of clarity as I stepped onto the rooftop garden of Hudson Heights one last time before the final push on Riverside. It was a ritual now, standing above the city that had both challenged and embraced me, reflecting on battles won and the ones still to come. Today would mark the culmination of a journey that began with a single mortgage statement and a whispered accusation of uselessness. It was fitting that I began here, in a space transformed from a vacant lot to a vibrant community hub. The wind carried the faint scent of sedum and solar-warmed metal, a reminder that perseverance and sustainability go hand in hand. I descended the fire stairs and grabbed my car keys, ready to face the final day of Riverside's site kickoff. The construction crews, environmental technicians, and art collaborators were assembling under the warehouse's giant arches. I arrived just as Layla was surveying the site's entrance, ensuring the permits aligned with the day's activities. She spotted me and waved. "Ready for the groundbreaking?" I nodded, stepping out onto the gravel courtyard. A small crowd of stakeholders had gathered. Investors in crisp suits, community leaders in casual attire, and a handful of potential tenants keen to join the loft community. A white banner flapped gently against the far wall, emblazoned with the words, "Riverside, from ruins to renewal." Councilmember Malik took the mic. "Thank you all for being here. Today we mark the official start of construction on a project that blends revitalization, creativity, and community. Let's hear it for the vision of one remarkable developer, Avery Hawthorne." Applause broke out. I stepped up and took the mic. Behind me, a row of shovels and fresh buckets of cement gleamed under the morning sun. "Thank you, Councilmember Malik, and thank you all for your belief in this project," I began, voice ringing with excitement. When I first set out to bid on an undervalued condo, I never imagined it would lead here, standing before a historic warehouse, ready to bring it back to life. 2 years ago, I was called useless. Their doubt became my fuel. I paused, letting the moment settle. This project isn't just about building apartments or studios. It's about transforming a forgotten space into something that uplifts our entire community. It's about the artisans who will shape our public market, the families who will call these lofts home, and the historical society whose legacy we preserve. I gestured to the crowd. And it's about you, the residents, business owners, investors, and leaders who dared to support a vision. Together, we're writing a new chapter for this neighborhood. I turned to the row of shovels. So now, let's get to work. On 3, dig in. 1, 2, 3. We lifted our shovels and plunged them into the earth, symbolic first turns that echoed with purpose. Cameras flashed, cheers filled the air, and a sense of collective achievement washed over me. Later, as the crowd dispersed to mingling and refreshments, I walked the length of the warehouse's central hall. Exposed beams loomed overhead, and long windows offered glimpses of the river beyond. I envisioned the lofts in various states of completion, raw shell ready for personal design touches, partitioned spaces for artists' easels, communal lounges buzzing with conversation. My phone buzzed with messages, final insurance binding, tenants' deposit receipts, investor congratulatory notes. I smiled at each ping, grateful for the web of support that had sustained me. In the late afternoon, I convened with Jacob and Layla for a brief debrief. We ticked off the day's milestones, updated the project dashboard, and identified next steps. Procurement of specialized steel, community outreach for local job fairs, and media coverage to showcase the groundbreaking success. As the sun dipped low, I stood outside, the warehouses bathed in golden light. I placed a hand on the rough brick beneath a patch of ivy and closed my eyes. This building, like my own journey, had weathered storms, abandonment, doubt, dereliction, and now stood poised for renewal. I thought back to the opening chapter, the moment I first held that mortgage envelope, my name printed in bold. I had taken it as a challenge, a gauntlet thrown. Unbeknownst to those who doubted me, I had been assembling my own arsenal: insight, determination, community, and unrelenting action. Tomorrow would bring early site inspections, material deliveries, and another round of stakeholder updates. And beyond that, the next project was already beckoning. a new neighborhood in need of transformation. But for now, I allowed myself a rare pause. I raised my eyes to the horizon, where the river met the sky, and whispered aloud. They called me useless. Lever show they saw my name on their mortgage, and beyond that, on every skyline I touched. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.